welcome to the Album Man, and today I'm going to be starting Halloween week, and I'm going to review basically 3 of my favourite Halloweeny, sort of scary, horror-ish themed albums. I mean, none of them are really scary, but I suppose you sort of get the gist of what I mean. So, as you can see by the title, I wanted to start with Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. Now, to some of you this may seem a strange album to start off a Halloween-themed week, but what you've got to remember about Tubular Bells is that the main reason, well, one of the main reasons this album became so popular was because the main theme from the first song on the album was included in the film The Exorcist. And now I can't say I particularly rate that film. I actually found it far funnier than I did scary. It's just such a dodgy film in my opinion. And as well as being in The Exorcist, this film also seemingly invented the death metal growl. And now you may be looking at me like, nah mate, you're chatting shit. But I will elaborate further when we get to it about how Mike Oldfield really pioneers sort of guttural screams and vocals on this album, which may sound quite odd for what is basically an instrumental prog rock album from 1973. So anyway, let me give you a bit of background. So as I said, it was released in 1973, and this was the first album on the Virgin record label, which of course was started by Richard Branson, and he took on a gamble taking on this instrumental prog album written and performed almost entirely by a 19-year-old kid, Mike Oldfield. This was an ambitious project for both Branson and Oldfield, but I mean it really did pay off in terms of critical acclaim, became a classic, and commercially everyone seemed to really have this album on vinyl at the time. I mean it sold about 15 to 17 million copies worldwide, which is a pretty damn good amount for well, an album that's as experimental and that was labelled unmarketable by other record labels. So we've got to look at really why this had such success and whether it stands the test of time. Now this album is only split into 2 tracks, with each side of the record being basically one of the songs, labelled Part 1 and Part 2. And Part 1, which of course we're going to begin with, this contains one of the most recognisable piano lines of music from the 20th century, to be honest. Played in a minor key, this line is the one that was used in The Exorcist. Not used much in The Exorcist, but it's certainly something you remember from that film. It definitely has this sort of haunting quality, and it's definitely the focal point, this tune, of the 20-minute epic. I mean, it's very, very difficult to describe everything that goes on here. It's a very complex piece of music with instruments coming and going, etc. But at the beginning, we sort of get the instruments come and go over the main theme. We have an organ accenting it from time to time. Then about sort of 5 minutes in, you have this punchier, electric guitar-focused, jagged section with this sort of effectively creepy organ, followed by a more ambient section moving away from the original tune. Now, I'm not going to go through all the various sections of this song because that would get a little bit tedious. Instead, I'm just going to tell you some of the highlights of the track for me. So one of them is the constant changing time signatures throughout. People often say this is a signature of progressive rock, and yet Mike Oldfield goes all out on the time signatures here. I was reading online about what time signatures changes from, and it seems the song begins at like 15/8, moves to 7/8, then 3/4, and just changes constantly throughout it, which is one of the things that makes it such a captivating and interesting listen all the way throughout, and that really manages to grab the listener. And especially because it never stays on the same melody or same instrument for too long, seamlessly changed between piano and organ, electric guitar, adding bass when needed, a nasal choir, the girly choir, as well as dynamic shifts with harsher guitars and, as I said before, the sort of creepier organ sound. Now my favourite part definitely has to be the monstrous finale, which is a driving bass line with the master of ceremonies, Vivian Stanshall, who simply just reads out instruments as they appear on top of the bass line, as simply as that. And the sound sort of gradually gets fuller and fuller as some of these instruments stay, some go, and others. It's exceptionally well arranged. And some of these variants of instruments he introduces are my favourite, things like double speed guitar, 2 very slightly distorted guitars, and of course the climactic plus Tubular Bells, which harkens the, well, gets in the big, incredibly loud, bombastic tone of the Tubular Bells themselves, and really signals the peak of this masterful composition. I mean, at 19 years old, Oldfield in Part 1 had managed to craft one of the most complex, ambitious, masterfully executed musical works, honestly, of the century. His skills as an arranger here are shown as to be second to none. It's just, again, I use the word masterful a lot, but that really is the best word to describe what Oldfield managed to capture in here. I can't even begin to wonder how he managed to pull this off at Manor Studios, and how, especially considering this was really his first album, and how Richard Branson decided to gamble on this as the first album. It's all just incredible stuff, how it even happened at all. And of course, it's also worth noticing just the quality of playing on here, considering pretty much everything. I mean, there are other people who play certain other things on this album, but generally, certainly all the guitars and a lot of the piano, organ stuff is all played by Oldfield. He certainly shows his talent as a multi-instrumentalist, and a very good one. That his guitar playing is exceptionally good here, especially with the sort of pioneering use of various effects and different types of distortion and double speed guitars and things like that. Again, amazing song. Though Part 2, I've always thought really paled in comparison to the epicness of Part 1, as melodically and thematically I find it to be weaker. I mean, there's still a lot of enjoyment and innovation to be found on this side of the album. This track begins pretty much where Part 1 ended, with this opening section building slowly from a softer piece. And again, we'll just go through some of the highlights on this. Some of the main highlights are definitely the bagpipe guitars. They sound so cool. I mean, they literally do sound very, very much like bagpipes. I have no idea how in 1973 he was able to find the effects and boxes to create a sound like that, but it's exceptionally convincing and very well done. Though the weirdest and my favourite part of this has to be the so-called caveman section, in which we hear the only vocals on the album. There's a few stories of how this came about. Some say that Richard Branson basically wanted some lyrics on the album, and Mike Oldfield basically got a bit annoyed because he just wanted to be instrumental, drank a load of whiskey, and just grunted and growled and howled into a microphone for about 10 minutes, and then just sort of mixed it in with the instrumental backing. But however it came about, it certainly seems he was drunk on whiskey at the time, and they are some brutal, for 1973, grunts and growls and howls and screams. Apparently it was recorded at higher speed, so when slowed, that's what you get, that really guttural sound, which genuinely does really resemble the modern death growl. And, not saying it would feel too out of place on like a Gorgoroth album or something. And bear in mind, this is 1973, again, when death metal obviously wasn't a thing. In fact, metal was only just about a thing in itself. So, utterly bizarre, weird, zany, but I just find it really quite cool. I didn't like it at first. At first I was like, what the hell is he just shouting over it? But subsequent listens, I've definitely come to appreciate this section, especially as really it's taking place over like a piano and acoustic guitar at times, and the other slightly distorted guitar line. Very, very odd. But then we have the last bit, which is probably the most famous from this song, and it's called Sailor's Hornpipe, and became a live staple in its own right, with Oldfield really pushing the tempo faster and faster and faster in the live version to just a frenetic, frantic paces. And so this, basically, so you have this Floyd-like ambient spacey section, and then you get this organ line which starts to take you into a mandolin playing what sounds like a jaunty sea song. Yeah, it literally does sound like a jaunty sea song. Other instruments added, it increases in speed faster and faster and faster. It's weirdly climactic, even though it very much has this navy vibe to it, and then just ends on these two loud notes. It's a very odd ending, and I feel that it really kind of appears out of nowhere. I'm not sure if I'd really say it fits in with the rest of part 2. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool, particularly how much he speeds it up. So, I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on where I stand with Sailor's Hornpipe. I think as a standalone thing, it's quite cool, but whether it really belongs at the end of part 2, it just feels like it's tacked on to me a bit and didn't really need to be there. But still, overall, Oldfield altogether crafted something truly original and innovative with Tubular Bells, and this definitely deserves its reputation and recognition as one of the seminal releases in rock music's history. And though I do find part 2 to be slightly lackluster and lack the strength and cohesion that made part 1 such an enchanting listen, I still love the gay man section, the bagpipe stuff, and it's still, there's stuff on the track that does stand out to me. So overall, I'm going to give this album an 8.5 out of 10. It's definitely a classic worth owning, and the opener is just one of the greatest pieces of music I've ever heard. So this has been the album with the first part of my Halloween theme. Tomorrow I will be doing another sort of Halloween-y themed album. Tomorrow's will be a little more obvious than Tubular Bells, I'd say. And yeah, this has been the TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching, comment, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.